Hello and welcome to Aliens Revealed Live. I'm your host, Dean Caporella, here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Alien abductions, monster-infested ranches, men in black, near-death experiences, close encounter experiences and more. We speak to some of the most amazing people on the planet, ready and willing to share their chilling stories with you. And they all come from the Aliens Revealed Live files here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Well, are there real UFO pictures by NASA available to the public? If only people knew where to go and find them. And in the best traditions of the ancient aliens show narrator, the answer is a resounding yes. But wait a moment. Before you go rushing to the NASA website and doing a research for NASA UFO photos, you need to listen up, as we're about to meet a guy who may have found the holy grail of evidence right in the backyard of the organisation, who has a reputation for putting a tight lid on any evidence they may have regarding aliens and UFOs. Over the past few years, Major David Toon has inspected over 3 million photographic images. The images were taken by NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory satellite, the Solar Terrestrial Relations Observatory, and the European Space Agency Solar Heliospheric Observatory satellite. Of those, he has culled out over 50,000 images that one could only surmise look suspiciously like alien spacecraft. A MUFON field investigator, Toon contends that scattered throughout the NASA solar satellite archives are images that may offer proof that we are not alone in the universe. A few of the most shocking pictures from his personal file of over 50,000 images will be offered for consideration as proof that we are not alone. The irony is that Toon didn't initially go on the NASA website looking for suspicious images out in space. Would you believe he was on there to check the weather radar and to see if he was going to need an umbrella? Toon wasn't actually even thinking about UFOs at the time. They were the last thing on his mind. Being in Florida, weather can change quickly, and he wasn't taking any chances when he headed out to his appointment. What Toon stumbled across instead were possible NASA spaceship images, and he's been looking ever since. In fact, while it hasn't become an obsession for him, it did open up his eyes to what is out there in the universe if only we would take a closer look. And Toon says he was researching the images for about a year, and while he was pretty excited, it wasn't until he came across one particular image that no one could explain. That's when he knew he was on the right track looking at these images, which were threatening to become real UFO sightings in space. But has he had any pushback from NASA? He says they know about him, but that's all. David Toon has now been scanning NASA's images for some time. Can he definitively say that we are not alone? And are these real UFO pictures by NASA? Toon says no, he can't, but he's seeing structures that can't be explained. So real UFO pictures by NASA. It's been a gift that keeps on giving for David Toon. There's been a long conspiracy surrounding NASA and their willingness to release unexplainable evidence out in space. I say conspiracy and use the term loosely. NASA themselves haven't earned any favours in gaining the UFO public's trust when it comes to releasing proof of aliens. Also, it may be somewhat of an oxymoron to use the term NASA's UFO sightings. Unless an insider or an astronaut comes clean about what they see in space, the public is usually none the wiser. What started out as a simple check on the weather radar has quickly developed into a runaway hobby success for David Toon. Who knows, the now retired US Army Aviation Officer may have discovered a significant piece of the "Are We Alone?" puzzle. David Toon is joining us now. Hi, David.
Hi, Dean. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So in a nutshell, explain exactly what you're doing.
Well, I have serendipitously stumbled onto the archives that NASA offers up for anybody on the web, specifically the solar satellite archives. And I had come across some interesting images while I was attending Embry-Riddle Aeronautics University, and took them to some of the professors who are quite versed in astronomy, and asked them if I was seeing the right things, or were these suspicious things suspicious to them? I didn't know what I was saying because it wasn't my field. At the time, I was getting a degree in unmanned aircraft systems. And they were kind enough to pat me on the head and say, well, some of this is cosmic rays and some of this is camera artifacts. But one or two of them made them hesitate. And I said, okay, I'll be back. And so I went back into the archives and started looking at other images and started narrowing my search criteria for those things that were not camera artifacts, that were not cosmic rays. And as it turns out, there are quite a few suspicious images on the NASA archives site that need further investigation. So I've been collecting those ever since. And that was the last 5 years now.
Yeah. And before we look at those, I just want to know exactly what made you go on the NASA website in the first place. I mean, you didn't go on there looking for these images.
I did not. That is correct. It's a funny story. I was about to go to class in 2015. I think it was January, first week of January. And here in Florida, it rains a lot. And sometimes you got to check the weather radars to see if you're going to need an umbrella. That's what I did. And when I opened up the radar loop, it turns out the radar picture for the state of Florida was completely clear. And when it went through the 4-hour loop, 5 concentric circles of clouds hit Florida all at once within the loop. As a pilot of 17 years, I've studied weather because my life depended on it. And I know cloud formations pretty well. And when you have looked like microbursts, but actually 50 to 100 mile rings hitting a state all at the same time, I thought this is a very unusual weather event. Not being able to make sense of it for local weather, I decided to look at spaceweather.com because I figured it had to be solar driven or something from space may have driven these concentric rings of clouds to hit our state. And when I went to spaceweather.com, they have loops for the day's worth of solar satellite imagery as well. So I watched a full day's worth of images, which I believe is like 96 images for a 24-hour period. And when they flip through, you see all the little sparkles and the cosmic rays and the stars and things like that. And the sun's right in the middle. And during that loop period, I'm looking for maybe a CME event, some type of mass ejection from the sun that may have hit us. Well, I didn't see that, but I did see strange shapes around the sun flashing through on the 96 images that were looping. And when I stopped the loop and went through the images one by one, that's when I started discovering these unusual shapes that didn't seem to be a natural phenomenon. And that's what started me asking questions and going to the astronomy department upstairs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I must admit, I could probably gauge your initial reaction. It might have been something like, my gosh, I think I found the Holy Grail.
Well, initially, until my first meeting, the professors were very kind and gentle, knowing that I was an undergrad at the time and I needed more research and to be exposed to more information dealing with space imagery because I was not familiar at all. And so instead of discouraging me, they encouraged me to continue looking, but they kept refining my knowledge base with better data. So I wasn't scaring myself with natural phenomena. And with enough new information and unexplainable information, that's when I really started getting interested in what I was doing. And quite frankly, it didn't really hit me for about a year until I came across an image that absolutely could not be explained by any of my friends, any of the professors, anybody. And then I realized I was on the right trail, looking at the right things.
Well, we know how NASA is very, very guarded on releasing anything that might look suspicious and get people talking. So why are these images public? I mean, can anyone access them?
Oh, sure. If you go to the SDO Solar Dynamic Observatory website or the SOHO website or the Stereo, any NASA website will have an archive section to it. And you can either go and look for the movies of the day or images of the day. And then there's a deeper dive into some of the archives that are just by every 15 minutes. You can see the image that's pulled. Now, these are at a cadence that maybe 15 minutes at a time, where in fact the solar satellites are pulling down imagery in much greater speeds than that. They archive them in different universities that I know of. Stanford's one of them. And you can ask for a whole day's worth of images. It won't be 96. It'll be closer to 800. So you can see more refined details if you needed to time-wise. But what's open to the public is plenty. It'll take you a lifetime to go through what they already have. Mm-hmm. My intent was to get a good ratio for how many images I had to go through to the images that are worthy of reinvestigation, to show just how much data NASA has on the internet accessible to everybody for people to do their own research. And it's been a fun find.
Yeah, I'm sure it has. Do you get any pushback from NASA?
They don't know I'm doing it.
Oh, okay.
I haven't asked anybody from NASA. I'm not sure I want to right now, but they've been very kind when the sites go down and they tell me when they're coming back up and that sort of thing, or if I needed extra data from Stanford, they're willing to help. What I'm doing is just a hobby because my background is more in aviation than it is in astronomy. But at this point, I've got enough data where it's worth putting out to the public now and for people to do a second look in their own research to see if this really is valid and worthy of further investigation by the industry.
So can you now definitively say that we're not alone?
No, I can't say that. I can definitively say I am seeing structures within the field of view of these solar satellite systems that can't be explained. Unfortunately, there's no way to be 100% definitive, but I have enough photographic proof that when I share it with others, everybody comes to the same conclusion. So in that regard, clinically, if I did a clinical study, I could give better odds and possibilities. It's still up to the researcher, and it is a qualitative analysis of which it took me a lot of time to put into a quantitative analysis for one of my research papers I did at Embry-Riddle. But even at that, conclusions for something this massive and this vast is really hard to say at 100%. But in my own life, I'm at 99%.
Yep. So how do you tell the difference between, say, a natural anomaly, a defect on the image, maybe a retouched image, or an alien spacecraft? Is there something that you can define that's different between each one of those four?
Good question. And I get a lot of questions like that when I do presentations for what I found. The research has to be done in this field on camera systems to start with. Every satellite system that goes up has different CCDs or CMOS systems that capture the data. And each one is affected differently by either more intensity or less intensity of the cosmic rays that do strike the system itself, the hardware. And you will see definitive lines, dots, and streaks that happen across a CCD image. That's natural. The scientists know it's a degradation they can't help. They try to wrap it in blankets that will absorb some of the cosmic rays so the effects are minimized. But for the citizen scientist, it takes a lot of research to find out what is already known for artifacts within these systems, and a lot of peer-reviewed journals that specifically talk about different high-speed particles, cosmic rays, muons, bosons, whatever is striking the CCDs and what those look like. So my answer to people is you just have to do the research. You have to understand it for yourself, because it's very easy to fool yourself that something is a UFO when in fact it really isn't, and most of it isn't. What I look at in my images is something that's what you'd call along the lines of a Gestalt principle, where you have proximity, similarity, things that general psychology would help us to understand how we bring this outside world into our minds and cognitively make sense of it. And so in space imagery, if you see a single streak or a single line, it's probably going to be a cosmic ray. But if you see three in a row that are side by side with a couple of dots in between, then you start wondering, well, why that combination? Or if you see a cross or a plus sign with four dots inside or around, perfectly aligned as a cube structure, that's normally not considered natural, especially when it comes to solar imagery, because some of these satellites are millions of miles away from the Earth. There's nothing out there between them and the sun. So when you see symmetrical objects, things that have patterns to them that are not normally associated with asteroids, comets that are common, then you start putting that in a different file and making a case for further investigation.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the more revealing images that you've come across?
Well, the very first one that made me go quiet, I didn't talk to family or friends for a couple of days, was a Soho image that was, I think, done or shot on 1996, February 1st. It was my daughter's birthday, February 1st. And it had, right at the far corner of the field of view, where the sun is always in the center of these images. So you have to imagine with me that the field of view has about 3 or 4 suns on either side as far as space. So it's got a lot of space involved, not just the sun in the center, but you can see a lot around it. And in the upper right corner was a group of lights that was not quite diamond shaped, but pear shaped. And there were 6 across the top and 6 across the bottom, evenly spaced, well organized, and had nothing to do with an asteroid, comet, cosmic rays, camera artifacts. It was simply not supposed to be there, and it was there. That was a year after I started looking into all these images. It's been 4 years since that time, and I'm actually up to about 45,000 now. Images that make you scratch your head and go, what am I seeing? Because it's not natural and it's not a camera problem.
Okay. Have you sought the help of other experts in the field to kind of gauge their reaction to what these things might be?
I did initially, and unfortunately some of the experts that I had gone to with PhDs and doctors attached to their name are hesitant to give me a yes, because it's really my research. They haven't delved into it. They haven't worked with me on what I'm doing. And I find the tendency for PhDs in this field not to want to lose credibility by leaning into this with a yes or no. I'm encouraged. They don't discourage me, but it's interesting to watch the humanness of what if this guy's right? What do we do now? And I'm not going to just give away my PhD as a support when they just haven't had the time to come behind me. And either replicate my data or work with me on it. So I haven't got anybody's attention yet that has that kind of time to follow what I'm doing.
Well, you never know. They may very well be watching what you're doing, but if they come forward and support you, they probably don't want to give you the validity of what you're doing.
It's possible. Mm-hmm. It's real possible.
Yeah. David, look, assuming that they are alien spacecraft, I've read recently that we could be looking at our future if they are alien spacecraft, because they must be enormous to be able to spot them from this distance. I've heard the term extraterrestrial intelligence spacecraft. Can you explain what that would be?
Well, it's kind of it's the same term, because anything dealing with a spacecraft means there's intelligence behind it. In the few hundred, we've been flying about 100 years, maybe 110 years since the Wright brothers took off. We have spacecraft now at the edge of our own solar system. So anything that we've achieved in the air and in space was intelligently designed. So if you flip it around and look from the outside in, and intelligence was looking for intelligence, they would see what we have, and we would see what they were doing. And I think that's kind of what we have right now, is NASA is looking for technosignatures. That's what they call them. They're not using the word UFOs. And they even had a conference on it last year in Texas in search of technosignatures. I missed it because I didn't get the notification in time, else I would have been there. And I would have told them, I'll show you where they're at, but perhaps next year. The issue is, even though NASA has identified astrobiology as the next big question mark with a lot of research that needs to happen, they also are doing it by trying to find an exoplanet with life on it. And in my research, what I'm trying to tell the folks that I do presentations for is, well, if they're intelligent like we are, and they're a couple hundred years ahead of us, or a couple thousand years ahead of us in intelligence, why are we looking for them on their planet when they're probably already star traveling? And if they're star traveling, why don't we just look at our star, because it's the best source of light for the photography we're doing. And quite frankly, I'm using the best camera systems in the world that aren't mine. Of course, as taxpayers, we paid for them. And they're kept up by the best scientific minds on the planet. And if we're catching their craft going by our star, then it would be an easy jump of logic to say it's possible we don't have to look at exoplanets anymore for life. We just need to watch the traffic going through our star system.
Mm-hmm. So in actual fact, they could possibly be other civilizations that perhaps have got trouble on their own world, and they've had to kind of build like an ark, and they're just traveling around space.
It's real possible. And even more so, what if they just have that much intelligence and that much advancement where it's done because it's a natural progression, like we're progressing. We're all now trying to do what? Go to Mars. Mm-hmm. Well, Mars is not going to be the final planet. Then it's going to be the next star system, and look at all the exoplanets there that we can inhabit. I think it's just a natural progression of intelligent life. So I don't think it's any different than we're on. We're just the new kids on the block.
Yeah. We mentioned about these must be huge objects. Have you tried to estimate how long these things would be? We're talking miles.
Oh, Dean, I got that question in my last presentation, and this is how I answered it. There's no rangefinder on the solar satellite system. So when a picture is taken from a satellite, it doesn't give you the range for objects in between the sun and itself. Now, the range is known from the satellite to the sun. That's the only known distance we have. If something comes in between, there's no way to identify, except in cases where the object is interfering with the chromosphere of the sun, or if you see something that is appearing from behind the sun. At that point, let's take the SOHO satellite. It's 1 million miles away from Earth, between us and the sun. So at 92 million miles distance in the focal view, if I catch something going behind the sun, I know for a fact the minimum is 92 million miles away. Or if the photo shows something interfering with the chromosphere, so the object is going through the sun's atmosphere, I can again approximate about 92 million miles away. I do have images where there are objects that are interfering with the sun's chromosphere that are planet size. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking the small planets, the large planets. So at that point, I'm going to have to say it varies, and it varies to an extent that's kind of mind-blowing at this point, because no one else is seeing what I'm seeing, except when I show them the pictures and they say, "You've got to be kidding me." So it's a new paradigm for people. This is life at a grand scale.
Mm-hmm. And have you thought anything about why they would be so close to the sun itself?
Well, sure. Some of the videos that I have show these objects, at least the presence of something parking next to the sun and allowing what they call the filaments to, I guess, I want to call it like a gas station where you pull up and fill up, but I'm not sure what they're doing or exactly why they're doing it. I just know that they'll park next to the sun for a little bit and then depart. So what they're doing, Dean, I just don't know. This is new to me, like it is for those I do the presentations for. But I'm going to have to assume, since the sun is got a variety of things going on, it may just be refueling. It could be as simple as that.
We see the images that are captured by normal people, with their smartphones, a camera, maybe even a video camera, and a lot of the times the images, all the film is dismissed as being just a natural anomaly, that they may have caught something in the glare. But these are pretty hard to argue with, aren't they? Because they come straight from NASA.
Well, that's why it's so much fun. I have a blast doing even weather satellites. I've got a couple of weather satellites looking at clouds, but there's something between the cloud and the satellite. So it's the best camera system you could ever have. Unfortunately, you're not in charge of it. You don't get to pick the times when you snap the picture. And it's really hard to get the subjects to stop long enough to get a really good view because they're going so quickly. But luckily, there's enough images to go through to glean some pretty interesting data that's hard to refute. And so I'm working with the best cameras on the planet, and sustained and maintained by the smartest guys around. So I have no problem doing it that way, because there's really no question on the validity of the data being pulled in.
No doubt you've documented your own work. Is there somewhere people can go and check out your documentation? Have you put together reports on what you found, the actual images themselves that people can look at?
I have not, and the reason is I'm just at that culminating point where I could do the presentations with what I have on a PowerPoint slide and show some photos. And what I'm hoping to do, and I've been promising this for a while, and I'll get it done. I'll set up a website and where people can go into the file archives of my own. And it really is just a replication of what NASA has, no different. And I even named my pictures and images the same ones NASA uses. But at this point, there's not a place to go and see my images because I haven't made them public yet. I do during my presentations, and I've given away some file data and Google Drive information for those who are interested in just a sampling, so you can see what I'm seeing. But as far as a website, I'm hoping to have one set up by the beginning of the year, maybe the next couple of months, and start sharing this with both scientists and citizen scientists for comment, because we are at a point now, at least I'm at a point, where I need as many eyes on to reduce the error rate of my own bias and start focusing on images that just simply can't be explained and need a real good scientific run-through. I have produced a research paper that didn't get published, because I didn't want to. It wasn't time, but it did run through a qualitative analysis, and I did a mixed methods quantitative analysis and used one sensor on one satellite and had proved a specific timing for these technosignatures that were flying by. And the same technosignature, the same look, the same lighting, it was the same thing. And it would just be in one frame, but it would whip right by the satellite. And I put that together in a file and did a research paper with that data set. And it had some really strong conclusions to it. Again, I can't give you 100% because nothing in life is 100%. But I did get an A on the paper, so I was happy about that.
Good. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I imagine this interview has probably lit a fire under some future investigators watching. If somebody wanted to do this research themselves, can you give them like a quick 3-point plan that they could follow?
Sure. If you choose a satellite system archive and start going through the images, don't do that until you've done the research on what cosmic rays, camera artifacts look like. Because as soon as you open up these archives, you'll see some strange things in the images. And you'll be chasing your tail if you don't know what to look for. But once you find something that's beyond natural or a cosmic ray, you'll know it. It will be emotionally, and it'll be a significant emotional event. But what I do, and I do it on a daily basis, is I go into, let's say, the SDO.com, SDO website, the Solar Dynamic Observatory website. And I go into the archives and I'll pull up the movies and I'll watch the day's worth of movies on, I think it's about 10 or 11 different sensors. So I go through each sensor for that day and I let the movie play. And during the 10-second or 15-second play, you'll get about 96 images that come across. And quite frankly, it's really rough. It's not the best of imagery analysis for those who do it for a living. But if I see a sparkle, a bright dot, or something like that in the image, I'll back up the movie until I get that specific frame and then go into the image frames themselves. Just a whole separate archive. It just does all the images. Find the date, time, and image sensor, open it up, and I'll take a look at that little sparkle.
Yep.
And if it's not a cosmic ray and it has some type of symmetry to it that looks like we put it there or somebody built it and flew it, it goes into my file system. So it's not hard. It's really chasing little sparkly things initially.
Mm-hmm.
But trust me, there is a lot of sparkly things in solar imagery, and you really have to be careful to put it in context and understand what you're saying. And if you see a triangle flying by the sun, it's probably not natural. But if you see a round circle or a straight line or a dot, it probably is natural. So just learn the science behind it and then have fun with it.
Okay. You can see the irony in all this, though. I mean, if these objects are, alien spacecraft, and at this stage the evidence is pointing quite strongly that they are, I mean, what does it say about platforms like SETI, who are continually sending out signals out into space trying to make contact with aliens, and they're right under their feet?
It's two different approaches. It's funny you should say that, because the approach by NASA has been one of slow revelations to the public that these possibilities are there, but they can't confirm nor deny. Their conference they had in 2015, Dr. Ellen Stefan, who was the chief scientist at NASA, did make an announcement that she suspected they would come across intelligent life within 10, 20 years. NASA normally doesn't prophesy. They're pretty good at science. And even though she made that statement, it made me think, well, you probably already know that's there. It's going to take 10 to 20 years to let the rest of the public in on what you know.
Yep.
So I see them as protecting themselves, protecting the public, protecting national defense, whatever they're protecting. That's what our government does naturally. So I don't fault them. I came from 22 years of Army. I get it.
Yep.
So I think it's just a slow approach, and eventually we'll get there. Disclosure, I think, is around the corner, but I don't think they saw what I've been researching coming, because what I have in my files right now is significant, and it will probably move us forward for a quicker disclosure once I get it out there to the general public.
I think once your website's up, David, I think you may find that they just might tweak their interest, and well, it could be fun.
I'm looking forward to it.
David, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a fascinating discussion, and we're going to follow your work with interest, and we'll hope we chat with you again soon.
Thank you so much, Dean. It's been a pleasure.
That's field investigator and researcher Major David Toon. Missing time is one of the signs of alien abduction. Many abductees are unable to account missing time, from several hours to several days. Denise Stoner is a MUFON National Experiencer Research Team member, working alongside Director of Experiencer Research Kathleen Martin. She experienced the missing time phenomenon almost 40 years ago. Stoner has had abduction experiences since the age of 2.5, and her life really changed on a night in Colorado in 1982 when travelling with her family.
My husband and I and our daughter and little dog always traveled across a glacier valley called South Park most every weekend for several years to a campsite. There was only one road that took us there. We stopped at a mountain pass and got out of the car and rested before we traveled across that park. Took us about an hour and a half to cross that valley. We could look down on a little town called Jefferson. And once past that, there was nothing, maybe one ranch on the other side. You could look out across. It was high desert, so we would look out across that. And we got back in the car, and when I looked across the valley, I could see two bright lights, and they were so bright I couldn't see what they were attached to over the desert. And we traveled down, looking down across the valley, and as we went down that mountain pass, I could see the lights coming across towards the road. The only thing next to the road were snow breaks made of wood, so that either snow, anything that could come across like tumbleweeds at night would prevent trucks and cars from getting into accidents if they were hit by anything blowing that way from the desert. So as we drove across, the lights lifted up and came over the top of our car. And I looked up, and when they were over the top of the car, I could see, looking out the window, that they were attached to a huge something that was very dark. And then I started to talk to my husband, and he was holding on to the steering wheel and was not responding to me. And I felt the car start to go sideways left on the road, and the tires were scraping because they were made to go forward, not sideways. And then the car lifted up, lifted over those snow breaks made of wood, right over the top and off into the desert. We were above the road, above the desert. And we went quite a ways out and finally settled down. The lights came over the hood of the car and an object landed in front of us. And at that point, I blacked out. I don't remember anything until both of us found ourselves at the top of a place called Trout Creek Pass, the mountains on the other side. And we had no idea how we got there. It had been broad daylight. We intended to reach our campsite in daylight with the sun shining so that we didn't have to travel in the dark. It was dark. Our headlights were on. The motor was running. We have no idea how we got there. And my husband had set the meter so we would know how many miles we had traveled. The odometer, it indicated that we had not traveled across that valley. Nothing had changed.
During the Colorado episode, and while missing time and heightened intuitiveness were signs of an alien abduction, the prospect of the visitors coming back for her on a regular basis was frightening. Stoner says the fear never leaves you, but it disappears once you're on board a craft. She'll explain this next week when she joins us, plus give us a description of what happened to her in 1982. Well, thanks for being with us. Don't forget to check out our site at arlhub.com. That's arlhub.com. And as always, keep looking upwards and take care.